The assessment. The crystalline spires of the Galactic Institute of Advanced Studies pierced the purple sky of Centaurus Prime, their surfaces refracting the light of 3 suns into countless rainbow patterns. Professor Zexval floated down the hallway, his levitation field humming softly as his 4 sensory stalks twitched with irritation. The latest batch of student applications lay before him in a holographic display, and what he saw troubled him deeply. "Humans," he muttered, his voice modulator crackling with disdain. "The council must be joking." His assistant, Telmira, a young Centaurian whose bioluminescent patterns indicated nervous excitement, hovered nearby. "The human candidates have passed all preliminary examinations, Professor. Their cognitive scores are quite remarkable." "Remarkable for a species that only achieved faster-than-light travel 2 centuries ago," Zexval retorted. He paused before a window overlooking the quantum gardens, where mathematical equations bloomed as living fractals. "They still rely on verbal communication, Telmira. Verbal. Like children playing with blocks. Yet they'd developed some fascinating alternative problem-solving methodologies," Telmira ventured. "Their application included examples of something they call lateral thinking." "Primitive pattern matching," Zexval interrupted. "Nothing more than evolutionary shortcuts developed by a species too young to grasp true cognitive science." He gestured with one of his manipulation appendages, and the holographic display expanded to show 3 human candidates: Sarah Chen, Marcus Rodriguez, and Aisha Patel. Their achievements were undeniably impressive, at least by human standards. Sarah had developed new theories in quantum harmonics, Marcus had revolutionized terraforming algorithms, and Aisha had created breakthrough technologies in neural interface design. But to Zexval, accepting them into the galaxy's most prestigious institution felt like lowering standards to an unprecedented degree. "They'll be here tomorrow," Telmira reminded him. "The council expects you to administer the standard cognitive assessment." Zexval's sensory stalks rippled with sudden inspiration. "Oh, I'll assess them," Telmira, "but not with the standard tests. It's time these humans learned their proper place in the universal hierarchy of intelligence." He accessed the Institute's ancient database, searching through thousands of years of cognitive science. There, buried in the deepest archives, he found what he was looking for: a harmonic resonance challenge. No species had ever solved it without at least a millennium of telepathic evolution. It would be the perfect tool to demonstrate human inadequacy. "Professor," Telmira's patterns shifted to show concern. "The harmonic resonance challenge hasn't been used in assessments for over 10,000 years. The council deemed it too complex." "Exactly," Zexval's voice modulator hummed with satisfaction. "And when these humans fail, as they must, the council will be forced to reconsider this foolish attempt at diversity." As he began preparing the test chambers, Zexval felt a sense of righteous purpose. He had spent his career studying the development of intelligence across species, carefully documenting the long, slow climb from primitive thought to true consciousness. Humans, with their brief history and reliance on crude technology, simply hadn't had time to develop real intelligence. Their acceptance to the Institute had to be some sort of political gesture, one he would soon expose as misguided. The next morning, as the first rays of triple sunlight painted the Institute's spires in ghostly light, Zexval reviewed his preparations one final time. The test chamber was perfect. A dodecahedral room whose walls could project 5-dimensional patterns of pure thought. The harmonic resonance challenge would appear deceptively simple at first, just a series of shifting energy patterns that needed to be aligned. But its true complexity lay in the need to perceive and manipulate quantum states directly through mental effort alone. "The humans have arrived," Professor Telmira announced, her patterns showing a mix of anticipation and anxiety. "Excellent," Zexval replied, his sensory stalks quivering with barely contained satisfaction. "Let's welcome them to their first, and last, day at the Galactic Institute." What Zexval couldn't know was that this test would indeed mark a significant moment in the Institute's history. but not in the way he expected. The next few hours would challenge not just his preconceptions about human intelligence, but the very foundation of how the galaxy's oldest academic institution understood the nature of consciousness itself. The challenge. Sarah Chen was the first to enter the dodecahedral test chamber, her dark eyes widening as she took in the crystalline geometry of the space. Marcus Rodriguez followed, whistling softly, a sound that made Zex Val's sensory stalks twitch with irritation. Aisha Patel entered last, her hands already moving as if conducting an invisible orchestra. "Welcome, humans," Zex Val announced, his voice modulator carefully calibrated to project academic authority. "You stand in the most advanced testing facility in known space. Today's assessment will determine your fitness for study at our prestigious institution." "Beautiful architecture," Aisha commented, her eyes tracking the geometric patterns that rippled across the walls. "The harmonics must be fascinating." Zex Val paused, thrown off by her observation. "The chamber's acoustic properties are irrelevant to today's test. You will be attempting to solve the harmonic resonance challenge, a puzzle that requires direct manipulation of quantum states through pure thought." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Like a telepathic Rubik's Cube. Your primitive analogies do not begin to capture the complexity," Zex Val replied. "This challenge has remained unsolved by any species with less than a millennium of telepathic evolution. Observe." With a gesture from his manipulation appendages, the chamber came alive. The walls blazed with patterns of pure energy, swirling, shifting mandalas of light that pulsed with mathematical precision. In the center of the room, a complex three-dimensional lattice of quantum states materialized, each node glowing with a different frequency. "The task is simple to explain, if impossible to execute," Zex Val continued, watching with satisfaction as the humans stared at the display. "You must align the quantum states to achieve perfect harmonic resonance across all 11 dimensions. Without telepathic abilities, you cannot even perceive the higher dimensional aspects of." "It's singing," Sarah interrupted softly. She had closed her eyes and was slowly turning in place. "Each quantum state has its own frequency. Together, they're making music." Zex Val's sensory stalks went rigid. "That is a crude interpretation of." "She's right," Marcus said, pulling out his datapad. "Look at these waveform patterns. It's like a massive orchestra, but each instrument is playing in a different dimension." "The interference patterns," Aisha added, her hands still moving as if conducting. "They're not random. This is counterpoint. Vach would have loved this." "Who?" Telmira asked, her patterns showing genuine curiosity. "Human composer," Sarah explained, still not opening her eyes. "He wrote music that explored mathematical patterns and harmonies. Some of his pieces are like mathematical proofs expressed through sound." Zex Val's voice modulator crackled with frustration. "This is not a music lesson. The challenge requires direct manipulation of quantum states through advanced telepathic." "Could we use the chamber's acoustic properties?" Marcus interrupted, already typing calculations into his datapad. "If each quantum state responds to its corresponding frequency, and if we treat each dimension as a separate voice in the fugue," Sarah added. "Then we could resolve the interference patterns through harmonic resonance," Aisha finished. She turned to Telmira. "Would it be possible to input audio frequencies directly into the chamber's projection system?" Telmira's patterns swirled with uncertainty. She looked at Zex Val, who was floating in stunned silence, his sensory stalks twitching spasmodically. "This is unprecedented," he finally managed. "The challenge requires telepathic manipulation." "With respect, Professor," Sarah said, finally opening her eyes. "You said we needed to align the quantum states. You never specified how." Before Zex Val could respond, Marcus had already connected his datapad to the chamber's input systems. "Ready with the base frequency patterns. Sarah, can you handle the dimensional harmonics?" "On it." "Aisha, we'll need your expertise with the counterpoint." "Already mapping the interference patterns." This is actually similar to a project I did on neural harmonics, just with more dimensions. Zexfall watched in helpless amazement as the three humans began to work. Their method was unorthodox, even primitive by his standards, but as they fed complex audio patterns into the chamber systems, the quantum states began to shift. What should have been impossible was happening before his eyes. The chamber filled with sound, a strange, otherworldly symphony that somehow captured the mathematics of 11-dimensional space in pure audio form. The quantum lattice pulsed and swayed, its nodes gradually aligning as the humans adjusted their frequencies with subtle precision. Mira's patterns had shifted to show pure wonder. "Professor," she whispered, "I believe they're actually going to." She never finished her sentence. With a final, perfect chord that seemed to ripple through reality itself, the quantum states aligned. The harmonic resonance challenge, unsolved for 10,000 years, had just been completed by three humans using "perfect," Zexfall said, his sensory stalks swaying with enthusiasm. "Absolutely perfect. Tell them." He paused, his patterns shifting to show sincerity. "Tell them they're exactly what the universe needs." Outside his window, the quantum gardens bloomed with new hybrid equations, their patterns more beautiful and complex than ever before. Somewhere in the practice halls, a group of energy beings was learning human jazz. In the laboratories, discoveries were being made through methods that defied traditional classification. The universe, it seemed, had been waiting for someone to notice that every species, no matter how different, contributed its own unique note to the cosmic symphony. All anyone had to do was listen. Patterns of possibility. The paradigm shift. In the weeks that followed, the Galactic Institute of Advanced Studies underwent a transformation unlike anything in its 50,000-year history. The success of the human students had triggered a cascade of changes that rippled through every department and discipline. Professor Zexfall found himself at the center of it all, much to his initial discomfort. His office, once a sanctuary of traditional academic thought, now buzzed with activity. The walls, previously displaying his numerous accolades, were covered with holographic representations of human art, music, and dance, each annotated with complex mathematical analyses. "The patterns are everywhere," he muttered, his sensory stalks waving in fascination as he studied a hologram of a human ballet performance. "Look at how the dancers instinctively calculate orbital mechanics in their leaps and turns. Tell Mira. They're doing advanced physics without even realizing it." His assistant's bioluminescent patterns showed amused approval. The change in her mentor over the past weeks had been remarkable. The new cross-disciplinary research program is already producing extraordinary results, Professor. Indeed, the Institute had established an entirely new department, Integrative Intelligence Studies. Sarah, Marcus, and Aisha had been invited to help design its curriculum, which aimed to explore how different species' approaches to problem-solving could complement each other. In the quantum gardens, where mathematical equations once bloomed in isolation, new hybrid formulas flourished. A group of Arcturian energy beings worked with human musicians, translating quantum mechanics into symphonies that made the very fabric of space-time resonate. In the engineering labs, Rigelian architects collaborated with human artists, discovering how principles of aesthetic beauty could improve the efficiency of faster-than-light drive designs. But perhaps the most significant change was happening in the Institute's approach to evaluating new species. The Council had commissioned Zexfall himself to develop a new assessment protocol, one that would look for unique problem-solving methodologies rather than adherence to traditional cognitive development paths. Professor, tell Mira's patterns shifted to show excitement. The preliminary results from the Beta Reticuli delegation are in. You won't believe what their interpretive dance reveals about their understanding of string theory. Zexfall was about to respond when Sarah Chen appeared in his office doorway, clutching a datapad. Professor, we've made a breakthrough in the harmonic analysis of your species' color-changing patterns. There's a direct correlation with the mathematical principles we used in the resonance challenge. His skin rippled with interest. You mean our involuntary chromatic responses contain embedded mathematical information? Exactly. Your species has been doing advanced calculations through color changes all along. You just never noticed because it seems so natural. We think this might explain why your traditional teaching methods evolved the way they did. The implications stunned him. All his life, he had believed in a linear progression of intelligence, a clear hierarchy of cognitive development. Now he was discovering that advanced mathematics and complex problem-solving existed in forms he had never imagined. In the main lecture hall, Marcus Rodriguez was teaching a packed audience about human improvisational jazz and its applications to quantum probability calculations. Down the hall, Aisha Patel worked with a group of crystalline beings from Rigel VI, showing them how human meditation techniques could enhance their natural computational abilities. "Tell Mira," Zexval said suddenly, his voice modulator humming with purpose, "I need you to schedule a meeting with the council. It's time we expanded our recruitment efforts. There are species we've been overlooking, artists, musicians, dancers, storytellers, who might hold the keys to understanding the universe in ways we never imagined." His assistant's pattern swirled with curiosity. "You're suggesting we actively seek out species we previously considered primitive." Primitive. Zexval's skin shifted to a shade of enlightened amusement. "No, I don't think I'll be using that word anymore. Different, yes. Unique, certainly. But every day we're discovering that the path to advanced intelligence isn't a straight line. It's more like a dance." Tell Mira suggested, her patterns twinkling with mirth. "Precisely." He turned back to the hologram of the ballet dancers, watching as their movements traced complex gravitational equations in the air. "We've been studying the universe's symphony for millennia. Tell Mira, but we've only been listening to one instrument. It's time to hear the full orchestra." The integration. 1 year after the humans' arrival, the Galactic Institute of Advanced Studies hosted its first multiversal symposium on integrative intelligence. The crystalline spires of the Institute had been modified to accommodate delegates from thousands of species, many of which had previously been considered too primitive for academic consideration. The main amphitheater, redesigned with input from human acoustic engineers and Rigelian quantum architects, hummed with an impossible variety of communication methods. Traditional telepathic exchanges merged with music, dance, color patterns, and countless other forms of expression, creating a cognitive harmony that would have been unimaginable just a year ago. Professor Zexval, standing at the podium with all 4 sensory stalks held high, surveyed the assembled crowd with pride. His skin rippled with patterns that the human students had recently helped him understand were actually complex emotional equations. "Welcome," he announced, his voice modulator calibrated to simultaneously translate into hundreds of communication formats. "1 year ago, I stood in this very spot convinced that I understood the nature of intelligence. I was, to use a human phrase, spectacularly wrong." A ripple of appreciative response moved through the crowd. Everything from crystalline chimes to quantum fluctuations to good old-fashioned laughter. Today, we celebrate not just the discovery of new forms of intelligence, but the recognition that the universe's greatest mysteries might only be solved through the integration of all our different ways of thinking. In the front row, Sarah, Marcus, and Aisha sat with Tell Mira, whose patterns showed both pride and amusement. The 3 humans had become something of a legend at the Institute, but more importantly, they had opened the door for a revolution in galactic academia. "Our latest research," Zexval continued, "suggests that what we once dismissed as primitive art forms are often sophisticated systems for understanding reality. The dance rituals of the Carina Nebula species encode perfect models of quantum entanglement. The cave paintings of the Betelgeuse primitives contain mathematical proofs we're only beginning to comprehend. Even the cooking techniques of various species have revealed new insights into molecular gastronomy and chemical engineering." He gestured to a holographic display showing the results of the Institute's new recruitment initiative. Enrollment had tripled, with students from previously overlooked species bringing fresh perspectives to every field of study. But perhaps most importantly, his voice modulator softened. We've learned that true understanding doesn't come from assuming our way is the only way. The universe speaks in many languages: mathematics, music, motion, light, and countless others we're still discovering. Our job is not to rank these languages, but to learn to speak them all. As if to demonstrate his point, he did something that would have been unthinkable a year ago. He began to dance. His levitation field shifted in precise patterns while his skin flickered through a complex sequence of colors. To the amazement of the audience, equations and formulae began to appear in the air around him, generated by the mathematical properties of his movement. This, he said, still dancing, is a proof of the unified field theory that has eluded us for millennia. It was discovered not through traditional research, but through a collaboration between human choreographers, Rigelian quantum physicists, and Betelgeusian cave painters. The proof hung in the air, its elegant simplicity drawing gasps of appreciation from the assembled academics. It was beautiful not just mathematically, but aesthetically, a perfect merger of art and science. The future of galactic academia, Zexval concluded, coming to rest, lies not in measuring other species against our standards, but in learning from all the ways that conscious beings make sense of existence. Every dance is an equation. Every song is a theory. Every story is a map of reality. After the symposium, as the three suns of Centaurus Prime set in a spectacular display that several species were probably turning into mathematical proofs, Sarah found Zexval in his office. The walls were now covered with a stunning mixture of scientific formula and artistic expressions from across the galaxy. "Professor," she said, "I have a new group of human students interested in attending the Institute. They're worried they might not be traditional enough." Zexval's skin rippled with what humans had taught him to recognize as joy. "Tell me about them." "Well, one is a chef who thinks about chemistry through taste. Another is a sculptor who says she can feel quantum probabilities in clay. And there's a poet who describes dark matter using only haiku. Nothing more sophisticated than music theory and mathematics." In the stunned silence that followed, Marcus grinned. "So," he said, "did we pass?" The revelation. News of the human success spread through the Galactic Institute faster than a quantum entanglement cascade. Within hours, the test chamber was crowded with senior faculty members, their various appendages and sensory organs twitching with barely contained excitement as they reviewed the recorded data. Professor Zexval floated in a corner, his normally iridescent skin having faded to a dull gray. His sensory stalks drooped as he watched his colleagues pore over the human solution with increasing enthusiasm. "Remarkable," Professor Ian Lipix, head of multidimensional mathematics, exclaimed. Her crystalline form sparkled with excitement. They transformed an 11-dimensional quantum problem into a 4-dimensional audio representation. The elegance is astounding. "But it's impossible," Zexval protested weakly. "They have no telepathic abilities, no way to directly perceive the quantum states." "Which is precisely what makes their solution so brilliant," interrupted Dr. Krelvox, a veteran of the Xenocultural Studies Department. His gaseous form swirled with patterns indicating intense intellectual stimulation. Instead of trying to perceive the imperceptible, they found a way to translate it into something they could understand. Sarah, Marcus, and Aisha had been invited to explain their methodology to the assembled faculty. They stood in the center of the chamber, surrounded by some of the galaxy's greatest minds, yet showed no sign of intimidation. "It's really about pattern recognition," Sarah explained, pulling up a holographic display of their solution. "Human music isn't just entertainment. It's a complex system of mathematical relationships expressed through sound. When we realized the quantum states were oscillating at specific frequencies," Marcus added, "we recognized it as a kind of multidimensional counterpoint. Each dimension was like a voice in a fugue, playing its own melody, but needing to harmonize with all the others." The challenge wasn't really about telepathic manipulation, Aisha continued. It was about understanding the relationships between different states and finding a way to bring them into alignment. Music just happened to be our way in. Professor Ian Lipix's crystalline structure resonated with excitement. But this suggests, could other human art forms contain similar mathematical principles? Oh, definitely, Marcus grinned. You should see what our architects do with the Fibonacci sequence, or how our dancers work with geometry and physics without even realizing it. A murmur ran through the assembled aliens. Telmira, who had been quietly taking notes, suddenly spoke up. Professor Zexval, isn't this similar to your theory about emergent intelligence patterns? All attention turned to Zexval, who had been trying to make himself as inconspicuous as possible. His sensory stalks twitched nervously. That is, he began, then paused. For the first time in his long academic career, he found himself genuinely reconsidering his assumptions. The theory suggests that advanced intelligence can develop through multiple pathways, not just the traditional progression of telepathic evolution. But I never considered that a species might encode complex mathematical principles into their arts and culture. Dr. Krellbox's gaseous form rippled with amusement. Perhaps we've been too quick to dismiss what we don't immediately recognize as advanced. The implications were staggering. Across the galaxy, thousands of species previously dismissed as primitive might possess unique insights and problem-solving methodologies that the academic establishment had never considered. We need to completely revise our understanding of cognitive evolution, Professor Ian Lipix declared. These humans haven't just solved the harmonic resonance challenge. They've demonstrated an entirely new way of approaching complex problems. As the faculty continued to discuss the ramifications, Sarah noticed Zexval trying to quietly exit the chamber. She approached him, her expression gentle. Professor, she said, we'd actually love your input on something. We think your work on emergent intelligence patterns might help explain why our solution worked. Would you be willing to collaborate on a paper? Zexval's sensory stalks lifted slightly, his skin beginning to regain some of its normal iridescence. You've read my work. Of course, Aisha joined them. Your theories about multiple paths to advanced cognition are fascinating. We just proved you were right all along, didn't we? For the first time since the humans had arrived, Zexval felt something other than disdain or embarrassment. Could it be that his life's work had been validated in a way he never expected? The thought made his skin ripple with newfound